Okay, we will call the meeting to order. Do we have a clerk yet, Kevin?
No,
No, huh?
I haven't heard a peep. I
So,
can put a note.
thanks. You want to call the roll then, Kevin?
Sure. Chris,
I'm here.
Juanita,
Here.
Clarence,
Here.
Fred,
Here.
and Peter.
Here.
All right, I believe that's everyone from the commission.
All right. And is is somebody here for the Parks Department? The first item one is petition number 6343, notice of intent for Parks Department for Loon Pond improvements.
Yep, I believe Adrian is presenting on their behalf.
Oh,
Yes.
just put the camera.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Adrian Dunk from GZA, Geoenvironmental, here presenting on behalf of the Parks Department for their proposed Loon Pond Park improvements. I'm going to share my screen so that we can look at the existing conditions here. So the park is located at 419 Pasco Road, the intersection of Pasco Road, which is this road, and Boston Road, which is down south of this figure. So essentially the park has been closed, it's gated off, and the Parks Department, their intention is to restore parts of it and then improve accessibility and improve the ecological condition so that they can reopen it to the public. To support this, we conducted our wetland delineation this past June, and we identified two primary resources on site. We identified a bank resource, which is this long blue A flag series. That's the bank of Loon Pond and of a discharge channel, which leaves the pond and goes under Pasco Road as a tributary to Jamaica Brook. We also delineated an isolated land subject to flooding, which is this B flag area. And this property here, where the B series is actually owned by conservation. So that's a pretty wet, kind of depressional, it's isolated area. It's an isolated land subject to flooding. Those were the primary resources. There's also land under water bodies and waterways associated with the pond. Obviously that's within the bank. So this aerial is it's a 2019 aerial on this map. You can see that there was previously an entrance, a large gravel parking area, and then this was a restaurant, I believe. And down here at the southern end, there's an existing kayak launch. So that's again, it's gated now, but a gravel access road, which goes directly into the water for small kayaks and canoes.
Actually, that was a regular boat ramp maintained by the state. People used to that's a state-owned boat ramp.
Interesting. Because the Parks Department is planning on improving that area.
I think it's city-owned, but I do remember seeing boats in there, like motorized boats, especially on one of the aerials I saw. Sorry, I'm Anya Duffy with GZA. Sorry for joining the meeting a little late there. But yes, it's gated now. In the past, it has been used by boats, and I know they used to like to stock that pond, but because of the gate and the lock, the state no longer has been able to do so. And in just informal talks with Fishing Game, I know they're interested in having more places where they can stock it for fishing. This would be a great opportunity for them to do that with this open again and improved. Sorry about that.
No problem. But and I thought, I'm 99% sure it was state maintained and controlled. If they turned it over to the city at some point, that perhaps, because that's why they used to stock, because it was a state ramp. And generally the state stocks from ramps that they have either ownership of or some type of control of.
Last I checked, I don't think it was state owned, because I had spoken with someone from Fish and Wildlife, and they were interested in it, and so maybe they were interested in rehashing what it used to be. But I got the feeling that even though they used it as access for stocking, that it was still technically city land. So I don't know. We can clarify that for the next meeting.
Yeah, because there was, Kevin, what there was a big disagreement because there was a lot of issue there with polluting and stuff going on with, people just backing in and dumping trash.
Yeah.
And the city wanted to gate it. And I remember we couldn't gate it because we had to get permission from the state at one point to gate it.
Yeah, because it is a great pond, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a great pond, so there are public access rights associated with the pond itself.
Yeah.
So that might have been part of that complication.
Yeah, could have been.
But we'll look into who owns it. The city's assessor map said city, so we'll just clarify and make sure it's not the state.
Okay, I'm sorry for the diversion.
No,
That's fine.
So those are the primary wetland resources on the property. As we just said, the pond is a great pond, so there is public access to consider in all of this. And then the final kind of natural resource on the site is that the area is priority habitat. It's natural heritage mapped priority habitat. We completed an information request. The protected species is an emergent plant. And so its habitat is from the top of the bank, which is the mean annual high water, to the mean annual low water. So really along that bank gradient within the pond. The priority habitat polygon, however, is much larger because it has about 100-foot offset from the edge of the water. So some of our work is proposed within the mapped polygon, but it's not actually habitat area. GZA had a meeting with Miss Deanne, who's the natural heritage reviewer for this project, back in June, and we discussed this. We need to conduct a survey for the plant within its habitat. So again, from the bank waterward. And that needs to be done under particular water conditions, ideally in a drought year, which I think we all know we are not in, to maximize the potential habitat. Essentially, we want the water the lowest it can be, so the plant has the maximum area when we go to survey. And so that survey is pending. With our NOI, we submitted the MISA checklist so that we can get a determination letter. And what we discussed with Ms. Deanne was phasing the work so that the city could move forward on landward portions of the work while awaiting the survey results. And if there's any subsequent permitting, like a plant protection plan or a mitigation plan, any work that's closer to the water or in the water would not occur until we have that. So we anticipate that being reflected in the determination letter, which we should be receiving within the next couple of weeks. And the commission will get a copy of that letter when it's available. Let me just switch screens here so we can get into the drawings of the proposed plan. I'm going to start up at the beach area. So here's our beach area. This line here, this thick black line coming across, it's essentially on the 50-foot buffer to the pond's edge, to the bank. That's our limit of phase one work. So all of the work that we're discussing in phase one up at the beach is going to be up here in kind of the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone to the bank, and within some of the buffer zone to the isolated land subject to flooding. This work largely is going to reuse the already disturbed area where we saw in the aerial, there's a large gravel parking area, there is a building. And so that area will be cleaned up and actually reduced in size to have, you know, a nice entryway. There'll be a guard or a toll entrance, and then some accessible parking and gravel parking area here. So again, this footprint's smaller. The rest of the work includes pathways to be installed that again are at an accessible grade and configuration, picnic areas. Some lawn will be installed up at the top of the slope, but then down lower where it's currently already exposed sand, that area will have some topsoil mixed in to improve the soil quality, and then it will be planted with a native meadow and left to naturalize. So ultimately the total footprint of disturbance will be a little bit smaller than it is now because the really developed areas are all decreasing. And the meadow is a natural habitat that will be a restoration of the area, which is currently gravel and exposed sand.
Adrian, if I could just add too. So now the beach is very large and it extends up that entire slope, and there is quite a bit of erosion occurring. When this plan is fulfilled and with the approval of natural heritage, if we can get closer to the shoreline, we'll have more of a stabilized slope, therefore hindering further erosion and providing habitat. And when we spoke to natural heritage, they like that because it's actually less of a impact to that endangered species. And it really directs where people can go on the pond edge to access rather than just having a much larger beach area. She liked that it was kind of concentrating it to one location rather than the whole beach area.
Absolutely. And you can see some evidence of that actually in the aerial photo. Some of this is the large sand area, and you can see some sediment in the water. So now still with our phase one, if we go down to our kayak launch area, I'll just zoom in. So this area, as we discussed, is gravel. It actually also has a current erosion control problem, and it has some evidence of stormwater flow kind of right down the middle, right down the center. And here you can see that the bank delineation actually comes way up. It jogs in, and that's because the bottom of this boat ramp has eroded in this area. So our phase one work is all, again, it's landward of the bank because this area is currently disturbed. It's already graveled. It's not habitat for this emergent plant. So we're still not going into the water or below the bank, but we're proposing to go up to kind of the most landward point of the bank. So this is our limit of work. And what we're proposing here is to regrade this, the boat ramp, actually decrease the total usable space of it by kind of directing traffic with some boulder placement, and then a construction of some rain gardens to allow for stormwater management.
Right now, the entire, like where the thickest black line is, it's all gravel and poorly graded, like Adrian mentioned, and it's like 35 feet wide. So there's no formalization. You can kind of pull in any way you want, park your car in any direction. This way you get a more defined direction of traffic, and you have your obvious pull-in spaces. By doing so, you leave out the mystery of where to park, and also you can create some little depressions to help with the stormwater, because right now it just goes right down the middle and into the pond. We're also proposing to remove and replace portions of the sidewalk along Pasco Road, because it is the driveway itself is seeing just road runoff going right down there. So by ramping up to the sidewalk, you're kind of creating a gutter line, and then water can continue on and go into a catch basin rather than just running down this boat ramp and washing out. So that could help things as well.
And so that's our complete phase one that's proposed. Following, like we said, following getting our natural heritage permits, having that survey complete, further discussions with them, we would enter into phase two. So phase two is not anticipated to start until 2022, just given the timelines. So phase two here at the boat ramp would include the placement of concrete planks across this area of the bank, which would create a nice smooth surface into the water, be accessible, and limit any further erosion of the bank in that area. And that's the only work proposed in phase two at the kayak launch, because everything else would have occurred landward of the bank.
You're optimistic that we're going to come out of this rainy cycle, huh?
We have to be optimistic.
As soon as it started raining, I'm like, well, there goes our drought year. And that's when we shifted into these phases, because we were thinking, well, maybe it could all be done this year. And, we get our survey done in time. And by the time we get to construction, we'll have our permits in place. But it's not looking like it, because the survey window is usually August for this plant, and hasn't been.
What is the plant, by the way?
It's Terry Aerothumb. I'm actually not terribly familiar with the plant, besides for what I've learned through this project. So it's been documented in Loon Pond previously, but I don't know that it's been documented within the park.
Steve Ribberty with GZA, he's pretty familiar with it and has done a survey for it before and found that it wasn't an optimal year and had to go back. But yeah, he knew, he had quite a bit of history with it. So he would be who we would send out to do that survey once we get clearance.
Yes. And then we'll move back up to the main park area to discuss phase two, which is more limited than phase one. It's really just within the 50 feet of the pond edge. Mostly it's, as Anya was describing, the restoration of the meadow and planting that, seeding that so that the slope becomes stabilized. The other major components are the construction of an accessible fishing platform. And so that platform will actually span over the bank. So there's no anticipated bank impacts, because it'll start in the buffer zone, span over the bank, and then it will have footings, which are within land underwater bodies and waterways. And so we're anticipating 8 square feet of impact, which are really just the footings in the water to support that fishing platform. We'll also bring the pathway down here to this much smaller beach area. This line here is an existing tree line on both sides. And so we're maintaining that tree line, and we're just going to provide a flat landing area, again, to make it accessible. And then the beach here. There'll be a retaining wall in the buffer zone, and that will have crushed stone backing for infiltration. And that's, again, just to protect the sandy beach area and limit erosion coming down the hillside and into the pond.
It acts also as a seating wall or something. You can sit there and look at the water. So it won't be a very tall wall, like 2 feet tall.
And I think that's the entirety of the proposed work.
So the area that's got like the dots in it, that's not clear, just back from the bank, is that meadow or is that beach?
This
Yeah.
area here will become meadow, the area that has the dots. Right now it's exposed sand, and there's, a few tufts of grass here and there, but that area will become meadow.
So the area of beach will just be the open area that's below there, below the meadow?
Yes, it'll just be a small opening for the beach.
And the beach continues easterly? And does it stay that width all the way?
No, that's actually all tree. There are small trees that have
Yeah,
established there, and we're not proposing to take any of those out. So we're leaving a vegetated buffer. That beach
so it's a
area is,
significantly reduced beach area.
It's significantly reduced sand area. It's a little hard to see here with all the flagging. But the trees currently exist. So there only is a small opening here that are essentially flags like A13 through 15 is the only current sand access into the water. While this whole large area is sandy, the beach with direct access into the water is currently very limited because of those trees.
those trees, yeah, we have survey from 2005 when there was a housing development proposed here.
Mhm.
And the tree line was a lot less. So it wasn't covering as much of the bank. So those trees have filled in the last 15, 16 years. And there's still this little opening there. And that's actually where you see the most sedimentation coming down the slope. And that's where you find evidence of people going there now. There's some litter there, like it's obviously still an attraction. So we didn't want to close it off. We still want to be able to touch the water, get to the water. But we're not expanding that footprint at all. It's what's open now.
How long is the beach area? I mean, how many feet? Do you,
So what we're proposing there, like,
Yeah.
If you zoom out a little bit, because I don't know it off the top of my head, but I could probably eyeball it.
Yeah.
So the width of like the parking lot is 54 feet. So it's probably about 50 feet long, Juanita.
it's not very long. Is that-
No. And we were down there, a group of 5, and you know, you that's about max. You're not going to have big crowds there, and it's not meant. It's unclear. It's not really going to be meant for like putting your towel down and beach access. It seems that's the program. So I think you can, you know, I don't know. I don't want to speak on behalf of the Parks Department, but that wasn't really. It is and it isn't. I know that people are interested in swimming, but it's also not like they want to have an expansive beach. I think the picnic area above, like that's where you can, you know, spread out and then take a walk down, take a dip, and then come back up. But that, you know, right near the water's edge is not where it wouldn't be like a traditional beach. And the swimming issue is up in the air. That's I know a lot of
That was a very popular beach area years ago. And it
Yeah.
used to get big crowds.
Yeah, I know it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place and a beautiful pond. But there is a water quality project that was funded through the Community Preservation Act. And the city's looking to do testing on several water bodies within Indian Orchard. Because it's been, the community has expressed interest in it. So they'll be looking at Loon Pond for sure.
Is Loon Pond a glacial pond? Is that
Yes.
one of the,
Yes, it's a kettle
It-
hole.
it is a kettle hole?
Yeah.
And so this, I'm sharing a photo here that's from flag A14, and that's really the extent of the beach area. It's 14, 15 was placed here after this photo was taken. So the current beach area is very limited by trees and other vegetation that's growing right on the bank.
You would
And so
think
knowing that the endangered species is there is why we didn't take it farther. We thought that we could hopefully gain approval by limiting
Mhm.
access. We initially thought, oh no, is this going to be a complete game break, you know, ender changer because the whole purpose of the grant was to have access to the water-based recreation, fishing, maybe swimming. So when we found out about the endangered species, we're like, okay, we got to shift gears and figure out how we can get this approved. We're not expanding the footprint of a beach. We're defining a use zone. And if we find any plants within that area, this would all come out of that review process with natural heritage. We would have to be moving it or shifting our beach. Maybe the plants are right there, but they're nowhere else. So maybe we have to create beach somewhere else. So that's all up in the air, that everything within that 50-foot or that line shown on the plan is kind of where we're at right now.
This down here, this is kind of the typical condition of the rest of the bank, where there's birch and alder and buckthorn largely growing right on the edge of the bank. That's the primary vegetation.
Anticipate down the road that you're going to get a lot of, I think, pushback from the neighbors, thinking that they're going to go back to the old beach that used to be there because it was quite the gathering spot. And I know that the Indian Orchard push is to create more beaches. So not that I'm advocating, I'm just saying, just anticipate when you hear start getting public input, that that's what you're going to have people talking about.
Thank you for that input. It's always good to know what people who are going to be using the park think, for sure. They need to love it for it to be successful.
Have you run this by the Indian Orchard Council, by the way?
I don't know. I think there were Parks Commission meetings, but I'm not sure if there was a community meeting on this. We weren't asked to do that.
Yeah. I would suggest to them that they do that to avoid the shock and then and some type of a negative public input later on, that they run it by, have a meeting out in the Indian Orchard Council, because that push has been coming from Indian Orchard to create an additional swimming area out near their neighborhood. So that's just a recommendation. I'm not saying that we're going to ask for it as conservation, but
No, we'll share that with our client, that recommendation.
I have a question. Going back to the kayak launching area. You said phase 2, you were going to put in a concrete to prevent erosion.
Yes.
Wouldn't that make sense to do it first in case phase 2 takes a long time and then you're going to erode what you've just done in phase 1?
We can't do it in phase 1. We feel comfortable working up to the water's edge, but because of this plant, we cannot go in the water without natural heritage.
I'm sorry. I forgot about that part. Yeah.
Yeah, this area, based on the regrading and the better stormwater management, it should improve erosion, right from the get-go. That the work that's done in phase 1 should be much more stable than what's there now.
So that's just an extra precautionary.
You're talking about like concrete slabs you see on boat ramps that they don't run into the water, they run parallel to the
Yes.
water's edge. Yeah.
We put him in at Gunnery Sargent Park, which is South Branch Parkway. And the ones we used there were like 12 feet wide. I think they were, or 12 feet, wide, and then 30 feet deep, and they interlock. So they have like a key notch. They're precast, and then they're probably 4 to 5 inches thick. You need a bobcat or excavator to drop them in. But you put that on a gravel base, and they interlock. And you have this plank effect.
Yep.
But it's firm and stable, and you're not pouring concrete and water and having to, drain the water or lower it. And we did all that with just a turbidity curtain in the water to avoid cementation.
Are there more questions from the commission? Hearing none, then obviously we need to continue this to allow time for public input. So a motion to continue to, will you be ready at the next meeting? You're never going to get that survey done in time. So I assume you want to progress with the permitting contingent upon the survey for phase 2 work?
Well, there's one, just to jump in, there's, under a typical situation, we would be required to keep the hearing open indefinitely until there's a determination from Natural Heritage. I think we envision that the response letter from them, even though the survey work hasn't been done yet, we're hoping the response letter allows this phased approach. And so we would condition the project that like phase 2 is contingent on meeting all of Natural Heritage's requirements. So as long as there's no curveballs from the Natural Heritage letter, I think, and it comes within the next 2 weeks, we could potentially close on at the next meeting.
Yeah, I guess I didn't make myself clear. I thought,
Okay.
I was trying to say the very same thing, Kevin,
Okay.
that what you're trying to do is permit it with all phase 2 work contingent upon Natural Heritage and the survey and all of that before it could commence.
Yes, yep, we would expect a condition in our order of conditions that all permits be required for each phase before the phase can continue.
So we may or may not hear something, have everything we need in 2 weeks, Kevin? What do you think? What's your best guess?
I think they were saying that they submitted it, what, like 2 weeks ago, and they have 30 days. So there's a good chance we could get it by then. But if it's like right on the edge, we may have to, continue one more time.
Okay. All right. Then a motion to continue this to our next scheduled meeting to allow time for public input would be in order. Somebody want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion that we continue this, the Loon Pond improvement until the necessary paperwork or the necessary, we hear from the necessary, the folks we need to hear from. Does that make sense?
Yes. Is there a second to continuing to our next meeting?
I'll second.
Okay, Kevin, you want to give a call to roll?
Yeah, Adrian, would you mind just stopping the screen share?
Absolutely.
Chris?
Yes.
Juanita?
Yes.
Clarence?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Fred?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
And
you.
I'll give my little spiel for anyone in the public who is watching this video and would like to put comments or concerns. You can do that by emailing me at kchafee@springfieldcityhall.com or leaving a voicemail at 413-787-6234.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for the
Thank you
presentation.
all.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
You too.
All right, so we'll move on to item 2, which is petition ID number 6344. Baldwin Street LLC for a residential subdivision north side of Allen Street.
I don't know if Ryan or John wants to.
Sure.
Take it.
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Nelson from R. Levesque Associates, joined by my coworker, John Tomaszewski. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Okay, so this is, as stated, a notice of intent. This is located kind of northish of Allen Street, 1879 and a portion of 1885. You guys might be familiar. We've previously submitted an ANRAD for this property, as well as a previous notice of intent for relocating a house on what we were calling Lot G. So I'll get into the existing conditions to start. This is the subject property. The solid black line would be the property boundary. Here are the existing houses closest to Allen Street. We've previously through an ANRAD have determined the wetland boundaries. There's an intermittent stream and bordering vegetated wetland that flows northwest across the property located here. There's also 2 isolated wetland areas located here and here. There's an existing sewer easement that traverses the property, starting here, makes a 90-degree turn, and then another 90-degree turn towards the grocery store off to the west. So the frontage area of the property is mildly sloping, slopes away from Allen Street down to this wetland, which is the low point. And then there's a fairly steep ridge located along the backside of these residences here. So the proposed project involves constructing a subdivision roadway that would service about 17 lots, which would include spanning this existing stream crossing, which the sewer easement goes over. So right now there's an existing culvert pipe that connects these 2 wetland systems. And then that's within the existing sewer easement. So as part of this project, the roadway would be utilizing that same stream crossing area. That would be the least impactful location in terms of span length, as well as wetland fill required to cross the wetlands in that location in order to get access to the remainder of the site. The property under proposed conditions will be kind of split with a high point located here, such that this portion of the subdivision stormwater would drain off to the north to a stormwater basin located here. And then from this point back towards Allen Street, stormwater from the roadway would sheet flow back to these basins located here. Here's another plan view. This would be the proposed crossing area. So we have flow from the stream within the wetland going in a northwesterly direction. Let's see, here's the cross section. So here's a cross section profile of that stream crossing. This is the existing 24-inch culvert pipe that's going to be removed. And we're going to replace the crossing with a structure that meets the Massachusetts Streamwater Crossing Standards. It'll be approximately 24 feet with an opening length. This well exceeds the average bankful width of 17 feet. And we exceed the openness ratio as well for this stream. As part of this crossing, due to the location of wetlands on both sides of the stream banks, we're going to need to fill about 235 square feet of bordering vegetated wetland. And we're proposing to replicate that just to the north, adjacent to the same wetland system. And that replication area will be approximately 320 square feet. We've done soil borings in these locations to determine what the groundwater in that replication area would be. So these proposed contours reflect getting groundwater within 6 to 12 inches of the proposed surface of that replication area. And this replication area is sited in an area of the forest where there aren't any mature trees. So we would just be clearing the herbaceous understory in order to install that. As part of this subdivision, because bordering vegetated wetland fill is involved, we triggered the threshold for a 401 water quality certification application through Mass DEP. That has been submitted, but has not been reviewed yet for Mass DEP. So that's a prerequisite to the commission, yourselves acting on this application. So tonight we're just expecting to, open the hearing, present what we're proposing, and ultimately continue, since we're waiting on DEP as well as some other town engineering comments. So that it's kind of some of the key points, and happy to answer any questions about anything else.
Could you just indicate where the 50-foot buffer is around all of the different lots so people can see?
Sure. So the 50-foot buffer is this kind of large dashed line here.
Mm-hmm.
And our silt fence stays on the outside of this 50-foot buffer. So there'll be no work within this 50-foot buffer with the exception of the crossing area. So from here, wrapping all the way around, we're just hugging that 50-foot buffer zone with our proposed silt fence.
So the
Same.
crossing and the creating of the detention basin are the only thing that'll happen within it, right?
Just the crossing. So there's no grading related to a stormwater basin located in the 50.
The detention basin doesn't require any grading, it's there already? The one-
It does, but it's not located within the 50-foot buffer zone.
Yeah, all the basins are located outside the 50 foot.
Oh, okay, all right. I was thinking that this one over to the right side of the screen where the little black dot is, that was a detention basin. Yeah, right here. Isn't this a detention basin? Yeah.
Yes,
And
Yep.
where's the 50-foot buffer zone there?
right here.
Oh, okay, so, all right, okay. It
Yep.
is entirely outside, I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
So one concern I wanted to bring up, obviously our big review here, besides the stream crossing, is going to be stormwater management. Because most of the house lots are outside of jurisdiction. However, the whole site currently, as far as I understand it, drains towards the on-site wetlands. Could you talk a bit about sort of, I saw a detail in your plan that it's really the contractor's responsibility for erosion control as the site changes and stuff like that, because there's going to be a lot of grading and stuff, and there's some pretty steep grades behind the houses. I guess the more northerly side of the street. I know we're kind of looking at it sideways, but the silt fence seems to be the only erosion control mentioned in the filing, and it's at the bottom of a pretty steep slope. I guess my one concern would be we get a big rain and that silt fence just becomes unable to handle it all, and then we have a sedimentation issue. So could you just talk more about that? Because that's something we're going to want to, if we get to that point, we're going to want to condition pretty heavily.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Sure. So as all projects similar to this size, a stormwater pollution prevention plan through the EPA would be a prerequisite. And part of that includes, temporary settling basins and whatever's necessary to kind of mitigate those concentrated overall site flows to one area during construction. But John, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. The stormwater basin depressions would be roughed in. Is that correct? So there'd be some sort of drainage pattern to those locations?
Yeah, I mean, there is, like you mentioned, there are going to be some significant grade changes. And there are some steeper slopes proposed along the rear, I guess it would be the easterly properties there. But a lot of the grading on site is pretty gentle. There's a lot of 4-to-1 slopes or 3-to-1 slopes. And particularly the basin areas are basically built up berms. There's slight depressions. So there's not, even in the proposed conditions, it looks like there's a lot happening, but it's the grading isn't too, isn't too major when all is said and done.
So the one part when I was doing my review that kind of caught my eye, I would say it's so if we're talking easterly and westerly, the westerly ones, the rear houses, kind of the first two houses, not closer to Allen Street, but once you get over the crossing, the first two houses on the left, how steep is that slope right there?
Those are 3-to-1 slopes.
3-to-1? Okay.
So that is mowable,
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have in that particular area, I don't have the lot numbers here, though, there is what we're calling a rain garden at the lower end of that slope. It's for stormwater purposes. But that, again, it's not the bottom of our slope won't be hitting right to our limit of work. There will be a little depression there.
So now is that rain garden just on people's properties?
Yeah, we have, we recently did one in another town where it gets constructed as part of the subdivision. And then within the deed, there's a grading restriction. It's called a grading restricted area, which basically it runs with the property that it's deeded out that, you know, the owner can't go in there and change it. And I'm assuming, I don't know how an order of conditions would go. I don't know if you'd have monumentation to demark the, you know, the no disturb areas or something like that. But it is something that they would not be allowed to change the grading in there.
I guess what I'm curious about is that rain garden just added value, or is that part of your compliance with the stormwater regs? I'm just trying to think, like, how detailed of a thing is this? Because if it requires maintenance from the homeowner, like, is that realistic?
It's required because we're, as you know, we're supposed to meet the pre and post runoff numbers. We can't increase the runoff in the post development conditions. And with this particular development, we needed them to be able to provide to reduce the amount of peak flow from the site in those areas. So that is why they're literally 1 foot depressions that will, with a small area to control the overflow if there is any.
So that's the primary purpose of it, is controlling flow, not for treatment.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yes, okay. Just like you'd have if you wanted to put your gutters into a rain garden on your lot, something like that. And in this case, we're using them as part of the subdivision. There was no way, those are lower lying areas that we can't control. We can't pipe it or control it by swales or anything to our basins. So we create these low depression rain garden areas to handle that runoff.
So what's the vegetation in the rain garden area?
We're just proposing loam and seed. So it'd be a mowable area.
Could we talk briefly about the overflows from the detention basins? I think you had mentioned this, that DPW engineering is gonna, we're gonna kind of concurrently do a review with them, because we're not the specialists with stormwater management. So we're gonna want to hear any of their comments or concerns addressed before we close. But one of them was, I believe the overflows go to a level spreader. Is that correct? And correct. The concerns about, although if done properly, it's not, the one concern I remember hearing was about that it can effectively turn into a point source. So could you just talk about your design and what you expect to do with the level spreader?
Yeah, I mean, well, with anything, it would have to be properly maintained, and obviously, if it's constructed correctly from the start, it should function properly. In our case, we're using basically 4x4 timbers, which again, with longer spikes, you put them into the ground. There's a detail. I don't know if Ryan, you still have control of what that would look like. And so the length of I don't know what sheet it's on.
What's the one?
No, maybe the last sheet. There it is, lower left-hand corner. So we have the timbers that, you stack 4 on top. That creates the level spreader on top. Obviously, it has to be constructed properly. And then there's, a riprap, bed before that sort of, stores some water, infiltrates a little bit, and then whatever exceeds the top of the timber is get your flow off the site.
In sort of we'll call it downstream of this, it says undisturbed native soil. Like, is that just existing vegetation is maintained?
Yeah, the key is to not, you don't want to build up a berm or anything. You want the elevation of that top of the timber to be at your existing grade. So the chances that you have any sort of erosion or anything like that are prevented.
All right.
Or the chance of that is reduced. Again, especially for this project here, the runoff is not significant coming out of these basins. It's pretty minimal. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. It's in the stormwater report, but it's we're not talking about large flows coming off of this site.
And those timbers, how about rotting? How long will they last?
Well, they pressure treated. I guess whatever you can expect for a lifetime. How long that could last, and then if they have to be replaced, they'd have to be replaced.
So presumably all of these stormwater management structures will come under the maintenance of the city. Is that correct?
Yeah, that I don't know. Having not worked in Springfield recently on a subdivision, I don't know if they oftentimes would. A lot of towns require a homeowners association to take over maintenance, but in talking with DPW, it sounds like they generally, once the road is accepted, they take over the maintenance of the stormwater system. So that's what there recently, I think within the past few months, the DPW has actually given out some new guidelines for their requirements for stormwater systems. So though we believe we've met all their requirements, again, we haven't received review comments from them, so we don't know exactly what their concerns might be.
I don't know if you've talked about this with the developer. I'm envisioning some sort of on-site erosion control monitor, that some language along those lines goes into our order. Is that something that, do you envision staying on this project through construction, or is once you're done with permitting, it goes to the the construction crew? Because that is something I would like to put in there, that we know we have reporting coming in on some sort of regular basis.
Sure. So as far as the overall site stormwater wise, that would be a requirement of the SWIP.
Okay.
At least once weekly, it is inspected and a report be filled out and submitted to the Springfield Concom. And as far as previous wetland replication crossing projects we've worked on that required 401 permits, DEP has conditioned that during the fill or the replication or the stream crossing work that the wetland scientist or environmental monitor be on site during all times of that construction. So that would likely be a DEP condition anyway.
Okay. And typically in the past, I think the commission has required the replication work to either happen, like the wetland mitigation area, happen prior or like concurrent with the fill work. Is that something you envision being possible with the sequencing? Because obviously sequencing of this project is going to be very important.
Yes. So also that's another DEP condition we've experienced in the past, where they require any mitigation areas be constructed first prior to the project beginning.
Okay. So right now for me, I think my kind of initial questions you guys have addressed, but in the end, I'm going to really rely heavily on our engineer, the city engineer's review. Just in the event you have to change something on the plan, that we're not having you come back and amending the plan, that we do it together at the same time in our review. So I'm going to work with them in the coming weeks.
Okay, understood. Yep.
It's funny with the erosion. I'm looking at lot 15 and 14. They were what, about 5 feet from behind the house, 5, 10 feet? If the front is 25? The back of the house, maybe 10 feet, 5 feet on 15. Boy, couple of rainy seasons, that house is going down the gully.
It's for someone who doesn't want to have a big lawn to mow.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking of because that's pretty steep back there.
Like I said, it looks, I think all these slopes look worse on paper. Like I said, it's a mowable slope that, I mean, for most people, I should say. It's not, you could definitely, with a riding mower or push mower, it can be mowed.
Actually, now that we're here, there was one more thing dealing with slope near the crossing itself. Those slopes off the side are a bit more than 3-to-1, correct?
Yeah, those are 2-to-1. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing we're also like. Obviously, this is going to be the spot we focus on the most.
Sure.
In our review, in how to, feel like 2-to-1 is kind of your max steepness, right? When we're kind of permitting road projects and stuff like that. So we're going to want to just see how you plan to stabilize that during and after construction.
Sure.
So maybe we can focus on that a bit more at the next hearing to kind of like flesh that out. How you plan to do that?
Sure. Yeah, just a little tidbit on that for now is, obviously we're trying to minimize our footprint going through that corridor. So that's why we're showing the tight grading. We could do more gentler slopes, but that would result in more BVW fill and more disturbance area within the buffer zone. So our game plan now is to, keep the grading as tight as we reasonably can, and then use erosion control blanketing and make sure that's seeded and stabilized as soon as those grades are achieved.
So if DPW says that they don't want a 2-to-1 slope, they want closer to a 3-to-1 slope, there'll be more fill, which will actually mean that you'll be doing a bigger replication area?
Maybe by a little bit. We'd have to run the numbers, but right now it's only 200 something square feet, so I don't think it would increase all too much more than 300 square feet probably.
I think probably what would end up happening is you'd have just more buffer zone disturbance. We'd have to look at it in more detail, but yeah.
Okay. Are there additional questions from the commission? Hearing none, a motion to continue this at the request of the applicant is in order.
I'll make a motion to continue this at the request of the applicant.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Kevin, before you call the roll, would you make your typical announcement about input?
Yep. Excuse me. Any members of the public watching this recording, if you would like to submit comments or concerns, you could do so by emailing me at kchafee@cityhall.com or by voicemail 413-787-6234.
And that's springfieldcityhall.com, right, Kevin?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Would you call the roll?
Ryan, would you mind? Oh, thanks. Chris.
Yes.
Juanita.
Yes.
Clarence.
Yes.
Fred.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will see you the next time.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to continued items. Anything for 144 Pondview, Kevin?
Yeah, I got a very brief work description from Charlie Armette. It wasn't the most detailed thing in the world, but basically what it said was that all the work that they're going to, it's a bit of vegetation management. They're going to demo that kind of decrepit shed and do some tree trimming. Everything's going to be done with hand tools. They're not going to access the site with any equipment, like heavy equipment or anything. And they're basically just going to drag it up the hill out the front. So it wasn't a ton of detail, but basically it's hand tool work with a crew and drag it out of there. So I think at this point, I think that's sufficient for the commission to act.
Okay.
So
And,
this
They
was
gotta
an
wear
art.
long pants and long shirts, if I recall the site.
Oh
It's
yeah, with all
loaded
the
with poison ivy.
pick the right crew members that aren't allergic. So this was an RDA. So if someone is so moved, the motion would be a -3 determination.
Was this a public hearing? Do we need to close it first?
Well, actually, the commission does treat RDAs like, I think we kind of go above and beyond with RDAs. We kind of open and
Right.
close. So yeah, we should close first.
Okay, so a motion to close the public hearing would be in order?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for 144 Pondview Street.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yes,
Clarence,
Yes.
Fred. Well, I saw him say yes.
yeah, I did too. He did.
And Peter.
Yes.
Thank you. So now a motion to issue a -3 determination is in order.
I make the motion, we
I'll make a motion.
issue a -3 for Pondview Drive.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I'll second.
Oh,
Thank you.
you got beat twice, Clarence.
My
right,
internet was delayed.
Chris,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yes,
Clarence,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, certificate applied 45 Oak Brook.
Yeah, that's a funny one. I don't know if you
This
remember
one
this
metal?
one. Yeah. So it was a little, they built, it was I guess a subdivision, a road. It was in the early 90s, 1990 was when the permit was filed. The houses are in East Long Meadow, but the rear properties are,
In spring.
at least in this one, it's all wooded. It looks like from the aerial photo that is in Springfield. So they got a permit from both Springfield and East Long Meadow Concom for this work. So, I mean, it was 30 plus years ago. They're just trying to sell this house, and there's a order of conditions still attached to it. So my suggestion would be that we just do a partial certificate for this lot.
Thank you, Kevin. So is there a motion to issue a partial certificate for 45 Oak Brook Drive, East Long Meadow?
I'll make a motion to issue a partial certificate for 45 Oak Brook Drive, East Long Meadow.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Chris,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yeah,
Clarence,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin, minutes?
Yeah, these I believe are the last ones that
May 25th, the last one that Steph did?
Steph did. So I need to work up the minutes. That's something I gotta learn to do, at least for the last few meetings.
Well, I contact the law department because Mr.
Yeah.
Pakula told me he had chosen someone. to be our
Okay.
clerk.
So we got to get him on board. So I don't wanna-
Kevin, remember when we went to see Stephanie, she said there was somebody in the law department who was going to take it.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that she thought she knew who it was. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll be honest. It just kind of has slipped my mind until we sign on, and I'm like, oh God, we don't have someone to do minutes. So I'm furiously taking notes over here. Well, we can at least take care of this one, and then I'll have a
Yep.
couple meetings notes. So.
Okay. So someone want to make a motion to accept the minutes for May 25th?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes to May 25th, Stephanie's last minutes here.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
I'll
Thank you.
All right,
Here we
Chris,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yes,
Clarence,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right.
So having gone through the agenda, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion. Go ahead, Fred.
We
I'll
all
make
make a motion to adjourn.
So
I
give it
think it
to
was
Fred.
Fred and Peter seconded. How's
I'll
that?
second, yeah.
Okay. Chris,
Yes.
Juanita,
Yeah, yes.
Clarence,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
and Peter.
Yes.
Thank you. All right,
Good night,
everyone.
everybody.
Have a good night. I don't know if we're gonna get, I saw a severe thunderstorm warning.